So here's your user's manual setup guide. You can see that this does come with the rotating quick disassembly connector adapter. So that's cool. We'll leverage that. Comes with all the hardware and tools that you need. And this entire setup with the drop leg, a mag holder, and we should be in pretty good shape. Now, the first thing is this is going to be a reinforced polymer, which is fantastic. The ability to utilize this in a number of scenarios, and it's going to be rugged, it's going to be robust, and I can tell you that this is just thick and feels really good. It feels quality. There's no cheap feeling anywhere about this. It's just solid and just feels rugged. That's nice. Now, in my particular case, you can see this is right hand carry, right hand draw, which I'm glad they sent me right hand, because I forgot to even ask, or I guess state, that I would need right hand. So lucky that that's what they sent. And you can see on the back, this has the ability to rotate this. So press this button, that spins. Very simple. Press that button, that rotates. Very nice. I mean, super quick, super easy, no problem. Setting this into the drop leg. At this point, you can see, again, you will have the ability to cant the firearm in any direction that you so choose. So that's very helpful. And then that's locked into place until you depress these buttons, and that comes out quickly. So that, again, fantastic. I'm sure that I will find out, and I will look in the Gun and Flower website to see if I can just get a high ride adapter from my belt, and then maybe other accessory clips that would allow you to mount these in various locations. And then that way you can leverage this right on your hip and drop that right on your belt. That way you don't always necessarily have to ride that drop leg if you want to carry it higher up, or maybe you're running a different drill and you don't want to have to swap out the entire holster. So again, I will annotate below. But all of this is for none if it doesn't fit my firearm. So again, this is the Canik Mete SFT. So you can see here, as I get this down and into the holster, should fit with full retention. Again, level 2 retention, and then hopefully covering that entire trigger well. And it's pretty good. Doesn't go quite as deep as I would like for full trigger coverage. However, you can only get your finger behind the trigger and certainly not in front. So that's probably reasonable. In that level 2 retention, I should be able to dial in. You can see at this point, it's a little bit loose, moves around, and I should have the ability to adjust this. There's that button, so that paddle releasing there. And you can see that that's clipping basically into the space in front of the trigger. Now, it does appear as though I'll have plenty of room to clear my optics, so I should not have any problem with my SIG P226. This is going to be about the same size, maybe just a little bit thicker in some areas, but the overall length and barrel roughly about the same. So this should fit in there fairly well. And with the optic, I would hope so. There you go. Fitting in there literally perfect. So that's awesome. And again, reasonable trigger coverage. So I'm okay with that. And yeah, that's going to be nice. So a little less wiggle there. As I mentioned, this is a slightly bigger firearm. But again, I should be able to dial in this retention. Depressing that button, and that comes back out. Now, for me in general, even though this has a Cerakote finish, I really honestly am not worried about that. And I don't see any place within the holster where I feel like this would rub or ride inappropriately to cause any sort of damage or wear on my firearm. So I think overall, this should be more than suitable. Now, I did want to try one other firearm that for me, I really need a holster solution. So here, this is my SIG P322. It's not quite a full frame or full size. However, I did also find that for me, I really could use a solution. I don't know if this is going to work or if that's going to be too loose. I was kind of hoping to have something that would work for this as well, because I don't have any holster solutions that are really viable for more on-the-move practice or training, where I feel like this would be just about perfect. So unfortunately, seems like that's probably not going to work. The Canik, that's close and still pretty good. Might have a little bit of movement in there. The P226, that seems like it's going to be pretty awesome. Either way, I just need to get the retention dialed in. Now, right away, I am going to come to a little bit of a crossroads in terms of what I can do with this holster. And this block here goes inside the mechanism that captures that trigger guard. And the reality is there's two different sizes. So there's what Gun & Flower is saying works for between 12.8 to 16 millimeters in terms of the thickness of that guard. And so as you take a look here, now I don't have calipers, but I can pretty easily show this with a ruler. That trigger guard right there is about 15 millimeters in overall width. So 15 millimeters on my Canik Mete SFT, which is meant for block 1, which is how this comes set up from the factory. But block number 2, well, block number 2 is 9.3 to 12.8 millimeters. So here on my SIG P226, that's like 11 or 12 millimeters. So that means that each one of these handguns wants to have a different block. And unfortunately for me, that means that I need to leverage the block number 2 and change it out for my 226, which is probably what I'm going to do. Now, before I do that, I figured I would adjust the retention on the holster. So right here, you can see there's a slot, and in that slot, it comes pre-configured with an Allen wrench. Now, you can see there's some wiggle and movement, but if I dial this in, maybe I can get it to the point where even, yeah, right away, minimizing the movement here, even with that originally installed block number 1, I mean, that feels pretty good. And that retention is pretty tight there. I mean, that's barely moving, and it seems to be reasonable. And I don't really see any need to mess with the block on the inside. So from my perspective, that works for my 226. The Mete, it is definitely floating around. And then the only question is, will this go tight enough to get rid of that slop? Which it's getting close. And it's so tight that it won't even come out depressing the button. So I need to be very careful. That's pretty good. It has a little bit of play in there, but it won't come out until I depress the button. That doesn't seem terrible, and fine-tuning it, that should work. But now with the 226, that's far too tight, and I'm not even gonna risk sticking that in there because that's just going to rub on my finish in a way that I don't like. So that blows away my theory of this being kind of a one and done, set it and forget it for multiple firearms. Unfortunately, this again remains a proprietary solution for only one of my handguns. And so now I need to pick, which now at this point I have swapped out that component. That is that piece down there. Now, they give you solid instructions. I am not going to demonstrate this on film. However, if you look inside, there's this triangle wedge piece, which sticks out further than on block number 1. So here was block number 1. And that is pretty much flat down the face. In fact, it sits in there pretty much like this. But where that has those triangle pieces, it's making up some of the gap where that guard now fits inside. And so that tightens up the tolerances and makes this a much more custom fit for my 226. So this is the direction I'm going to go. At this point, I have taken the Allen key. I have tightened up on the retention. So you can see the retention screw there. Just tighten that up. And at this point, fitting very good. Just a tiny bit of movement, and then very easy to get the firearm in and out of that holster. So I would say setup is complete for the 226. So now moving forward, pretty straightforward in terms of getting everything set up for the drop leg. Here you can see it does come with this belt loop and quick detach with these buckles, which is very nice. So get that established onto your belt. Now I can say I will probably use more of like a training belt. So for example, I'll probably put the loop on an actual training belt and have that ready, put that around, and that way it's not connected directly to my pants. But at that point, you can see clearly the ability to get that loop in place up front. Then connect the buckle, no problem there, pretty straightforward. Now, I like the fact that this has dual retention there around your legs, so you can get this set up and fairly comfortable. Contours nicely. You can see the actual plastic plate itself sitting nicely around the leg. Has a little bit of flex, a little bit of give, but ironically, it's literally like the exact diameter of my legs, and I have skinny legs. So that works out very well where it's incredibly comfortable for me. So that's pretty cool. And then again, obviously it's got a little bit of shock in the actual strap, so a little flex and a little bit of give. In terms of getting the firearm itself into place, there are these buttons here, so you can see that I was able to leverage the adapter really fast and just drop that right down and in, and everything seems to be secure. Now, without the firearm grabbing on that, pulling on that, I don't have any fear that that's going to let go. And what I was saying earlier is, well, I'd love to have another one of the female sections up on my hip so that if I wanted to, I could easily connect my firearm up here, change it up in the middle of my day if I change my drill or want to carry it differently, and then I can drop this entire piece all together, get rid of that, shed it out of the way. And then when I go back to more of the running and gunning, or if I want the drop leg, connect that back up, pull this off of my hip, and then boom, down and into place. So I will again annotate below to let you know whether or not there's an additional adapter you can put up on your hip. Firearm at this point, no problem. Right down and in place, secure. That feels really good. I have no fear that that's going to fall out. Feels like everything's going to do exactly what it needs. That retention seems solid. I'm pulling on that reasonably violent at this point. That level 2 retention has that button right there. So it's going to be your trigger finger discipline that puts your finger down, depresses that button, and as you draw, it's promoting your finger out of the trigger well already. So that's doing exactly what it's supposed to do in terms of your ability to withdraw, but also keep your finger off of that trigger. So as long as you practice and you're careful, that should be absolutely no problem right there. It's quick, it's easy, it's repeatable, and it works within your already developed muscle memory for what should be general safety and keeping your finger out of that trigger well. So I like this design quite a bit. Now again, you do have the ability to leverage this button, and you can cant this in a couple of different ways. You can literally swing it all the way around. So if you were somebody that wanted to have a little bit of a cant, maybe you're getting a little more aggressive in your stance and you want the ability to get right down, that would present the weapon more vertically and in line with your master grip as you go down to grab the firearm. For me, I'll probably just keep that standard, get a little more practice with it in this particular location, and just, I don't know. I actually don't mind that being forward one click. That's not bad. So the fact that you have some flexibility and adjustability here is pretty cool. Now, I'm going to be a little bit nitpicky, which is I want the click in between. I don't want it straight up and down. I don't want it all the way forward. I want whatever halfway would have been, but it doesn't exist. So in my opinion, one more notch in the middle would have made this better. I don't know if that means the teeth in there would have been too fine, or if they wouldn't have the ability to do that. But in my opinion, one more space in between would have been a little bit better. Now this is your magazine holder. You do have the ability to leverage this in a couple of locations. I would say depending on kind of how you have things set up, that might work or might not work the best. But you do have the ability to run that in either the front or the back. I am going to attempt to try this, I think in the back, but the other problem is that's not with my reload hand. So bottom line is, for me, it would have to be in the front if I was going to grab a spare magazine as part of a reload, or at least it's the ability to carry some extra ammo with you. So a little bit limited and cumbersome in terms of the actual functionality, where most of my reload and most of my magazines do really want to be on my weak side. But here for the demonstration, I have my Canik Mete SFT magazine. I did not want to introduce my 226 magazines because they have live ammo in them. But I'm going to try to orient these in a couple of different ways. So that will fit, you can see, facing that direction, and then going the same way, which means you can orient these either way you want. Inside, they do have a bit of a spring clip to basically depress and maintain retention. That's nice. So you can see either way you go, that functions just fine. These are double stack 9mm magazines, and you can see they fit in there easily. No fear they're going to come out, at least unloaded. With weight, it's hard to say, but generally speaking, I feel like the retention will be perfectly fine. And so, all right, guys, there you have it. A look at the Gun and Flower Universal holster. Generally speaking, very good. I do like it. It's going to work very well for me. The only thing that has me just a little bit bummed out is it will work for me for my 226 at this time. If I wanted to swap everything around and get it set up for the Canik, I could do so. But of course, that's a little bit of setup, a little bit of maintenance. It's not a big deal. I was hoping it was going to be just a little more universal, where on a range day, mix and match, take my Canik and my 226 and then use them both interchangeably. It's not quite that universal. I'm glad I learned the lesson now. As I always say, practice in a controlled environment, so when you get out into the real world, you've had some practice. If I brought this straight to the range, I would have been, unfortunately, disappointed. But I do like the retention. It feels about perfect. I like the adjustability. I have it now at that little bit of a cant. Again, my only other critique is I wish it had a bit of a sort of a middle ground in terms of the ability to set this just slightly off by 1 degree, or split the difference between vertical and that forward cant. But other than that, very nice. The retention mechanism is literally perfect. I love that it's on my trigger finger, and the fact that it's oriented so that when I press that, my trigger finger is actually off the trigger, out of the trigger well, and it's in that disciplined mindset where it's right where it needs to be along the side of the slide and off of that trigger well. That's great. So to me, the design is just about perfect. Construction, solid, rugged. I'll be interested to see how this survives long term, but I don't see there being any problem whatsoever. I really like this. I think it's a nice holster, and I look forward to bringing it to the range. And so again, to the people at Gun and Flower,